or you believe another credit hack on social media, stop. There is one thing I recommend every single person do first. Hi, I'm Christian Simon, the founder of Virtual Favor Solutions, but you can call me the credit chemist. Today, I'm going to show you the exact credit report I like to use before I make a single recommendation about my client's profile. I'm also going to explain why I believe it's one of the most important tools for understanding your credit. And before this video is over, I'll show you exactly where you can get it so you can follow along with this entire process and do the same thing as well. Now, let's get familiar with the actual report. Before we start analyzing anything, I want you to understand how this credit report is organized. Think of it as like a table of contents. Once you know where everything lives, it becomes much easier to understand what you're actually looking at. So right now on the screen, you will see a summary section. It's going to contain the credit scores from each bureau, TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax, and it's also going to show personal information. Now, I'm not going to show personal information because this is a profile, and I want to protect the integrity of the sample profile information. So after the section of personal information, you will see a summary section. As you can see, this particular sample profile has 62 total accounts, 34 open accounts, 29 closed accounts, 0 delinquent accounts, 2 derogatory accounts, and then also goes into the balances, the payments, and the inquiries. So think of this as like an overall summary or snapshot of what is on your credit profile. Now, as you can see over in this column, it says it identifies how many things match. We're not going to get really into that too much detail with that right now, but that is important. So keep that in mind for later. Next one, it gives a little bit of account history. It talks about your revolving accounts. And for further context, revolving accounts are basically credit cards and things of that nature. So it gives a lot of detail. If I were to open up where it says view all details, it will go into payment history, the account number, the balance, date it was reported, date as activity, and things of that nature. So after the revolving accounts, which this client has a substantial amount of those, it's going to get into the installment accounts. Now, typically, these are accounts such as student loans, which right here, this is a NailNet student loan account. It could also be things like firm, or if you were to have like a car payment, that would be under this section as well. So those differ from the revolving accounts. Short-term loans, long-term loans, think of things of that nature. So the next section is going to be the collections accounts. So this will be where some of your derogatory accounts will lie. Now, it could be a collection or it could be a charge-off account. Those are two separate accounts, and they could be listed under this section as well. Basically, a collection account is an account that you had at one point and you didn't pay, and now they are pursuing you to get those monies back from you. Like once you go so far delinquent, then that collection account can turn into a charged-off account, which is basically one of the stricter penalty type of accounts. After the collections account, you're going to have public records. Those will be things like bankruptcies. And inquiries will be in the next part after public records. Inquiries are broken down into hard inquiries and soft inquiries. Now, the hard inquiries are those that say you are applying for new credit, you're applying for a new vehicle, things of that nature. You will see those reported here. So this particular profile has applied for a couple Citibank situations, Merrick situation, First National Bank. Those are known as the hard inquiries. Now, as far as creditor contacts, this is where you can get information about your soft inquiries. A lot of times, different creditors will pull your credit each month. I know American Express does that. And it's basically a creditor contact or another word for soft inquiry. And this is one area of your credit report that doesn't necessarily count against you, but If you look at this section of the credit report, you can get a lot of inside information as to what creditors may be potentially trying to put you into collections or potentially trying to come after you for debt because you can say like, oh, okay, I didn't, I'm looking at from month to month when you monitor your credit. If a creditor was not on there before but they are on there now, they could either be looking to send you to collections to collect on the unpaid debt, or they could be looking to potentially give you a credit line increase or offer you some type of credit card via the mail, etc., things of that nature. So a lot of people overlook this section, but sometimes I like to say it is hidden gems in the smaller sections that some people overlook. And then also one thing that I think is really good about this section is that it gives the name, the address, and also, a phone number. So sometimes that can come in handy in case you ever do have to reach out to creditor, because every creditor that is listed on your report should be in this section also. So you will be able to have a reference point of how to contact them if need be. So that pretty much makes up all the sections of the credit report. So now I want to talk a little bit of why this type of credit report is so important. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when trying to fix their credit is using incomplete information. I know it's a lot of apps out here, such as like Credit Karma, that give you information on your credit report, but a lot of times that information is not necessarily always it's not always, I want to say like the best word for it, complete. But when you are, reviewing your credit profile, you want to make sure that the information that you have is the full story and not just, a piece of the puzzle. Because if you don't have the full story, you can't make the most accurate assessment, which is not necessarily the best game plan. So as for me, I want to understand the entire story behind the credit report, not just the score. Because a lot of times, like people will just focus on the score instead of the actual story behind the score. And once you focus on the story, that's where you get into the details and that's where the magic happens. So I'm not going to show personal information, but if I was to scroll back up to personal information, one of the questions that you should be asking yourself is everything accurate? Are there old addresses? Is there anything that immediately stands out? Before we ever think about disputes, we need to understand what we're actually looking at. Because if you notice some things that are not accurate or that look a little off to you, then you can use those things as leverage. So after I review personal information, I look at the accounts. I look at the payment history. Let me show you a little bit. So if you click on view all details, right here, most credit reports give you a 2-year snapshot of payment history. This part is very important because if you notice discrepancies between bureaus, you can use those discrepancies to your advantage when you're crafting your disputes. I also look to see if any other information on the accounts is if it appears to be consistent. And I'm not just talking about the payment history here. I'm talking about. Let me see if I can find an example on this one. So as of right here, it says derogatory accounts, large discrepancy found. So on TransUnion and Equifax, we have two, but on Experian, we only have one. So there's a discrepancy that we could potentially use to our advantage when we're crafting, our disputes to the bureaus. So all of this is important because you want to gather information so we can use factual information to handle our disputes. So also when I talk about collections, just because an account is in collections doesn't automatically mean it should be disputed. There are several things that I evaluate before making that recommendation, but we'll cover that in another video. As for, we talked about late payment, so we need to go back to those. But utilization is huge. Ideally, you want to keep your utilization under 30%. But if you want the ultimate sweet spot to maintain all your maximum points for your credit score, because utilization gets a certain amount of points of the total credit score, you want to keep utilization under 9%. I would say 3 to 4% is the sweet spot, but the absolute max that you want to have is 30%. So this one thing about this credit report that I just absolutely love is that they give you the credit utilization. So you see this credit card is at 67%. So that I would tell my client, hey, let's try to bring this balance down. Let's think of some ways that we can implement to bring this balance down. This one is 12%, not so much really worried about that. 21% is under that 30. But right here, this Capital One is at 92%. So that is one that we would like to bring down because a lot of times once you get 50% of your credit card usage, the lender basically considers you as being maxed out and you're not really able to benefit from a lot of points in that particular part of your credit score. So, this is one that I would tell my client to focus on first. So that is one of the things that I just really love about this credit report is the whole utilization aspect because it shows it individually instead of just showing it overall. Because ideally, you want to look at each of your accounts individually for utilization and you want to make sure that you are attacking that 30% or if you're going for the maximum approval, 9 or 3 to 4 for that sweet spot. So now that you've seen why I use this report, you're probably wondering where do I get it? So I've linked the exact credit term monitoring service I use in the description below this video. If you're planning to follow this YouTube series, I highly recommend pulling the exact same report. So we're looking at the exact same information, presenting it in an exact same way. Only it will be your profile that you will be looking at, but you will be able to follow along because you will be able to see exactly the information presented in this area. So this is the super secret credit report. It is through Smart Credit, and this link will be linked down below. So if you found this video helpful, I would love to have you subscribe and join me as we work through this series together. And if you're following along, don't forget to grab the credit monitoring link in the description so you'll have the same report I'm using in the future videos. Until next time, remember, repair, renew, reclaim your financial freedom, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.